Recently, the Palestinian Authority has been trying to convince European countries to recognize a Palestinian state based on their demands that Israel withdraw to the 1949 armistice line, resettle refugees in Israel, and divide the Israeli capital Jerusalem to make it their capital as well. This is just the latest example of the lengths the Palestinians will go to avoid face-to-face negotiations with Israel and seek out an outside force to compel Israel to capitulate to their demands. For decades, the Palestinians hoped the Arab states would drive the Jews into the sea to make way for their state. This vision failed for two reasons. First, the Arab states were not interested in creating a Palestinian state. They were interested in carving up Israel among themselves, and second, they lost the wars they started to destroy Israel. For some time afterward, the Palestinians pursued a terror campaign to liberate Palestine from the Zionists. This too failed, as Israelis proved resilient even after the most heinous atrocities, and the Israel Defense Forces have deterred or interdicted most terrorist attacks. This has not deterred Hamas from continuing to pursue this strategy, but Israel demonstrated in Operation Protective Edge that it is capable of withstanding rocket bombardments while inflicting painful reprisals. The Palestinians have tried negotiations as well, but refused to give up anything and consistently demanded one-sided concessions from Israel. When this produced the expected results, they walked out and wasted years refusing to negotiate. Having failed with all three strategies, the Palestinians are now determined to convince the international community to deliver to them on a silver platter what they could not achieve by war, terror, or negotiations. Many people have forgotten, however, that the Palestinians declared a state in 1988 and today have embassies around the world, and yet the situation on the ground has not changed. The same will be true if the Palestinians succeed in their present campaign. A unilateral declaration of statehood is more likely to harden Israeli attitudes than to encourage concessions. Israelis already feel little compulsion to compromise given their experience since withdrawing from the Gaza Strip. Israelis ask themselves how they can give up territory in the West Bank and risk the possibility that it will be taken over by Hamas, which is one of the organization's goals, or that other terrorists will use it as a base from which to launch rockets that could easily hit Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Ben Gurion Airport. UN Resolution 242, the basis for peace negotiations, specifically calls for an agreement that will bring peace and security. Without an agreement on security matters, the Israeli Defense Forces will remain in the West Bank to defend the country. International recognition outside of bilateral negotiations would give Israel no incentive to make concessions on land, borders, settlements, water, or the status of Jerusalem, which would remain the undivided capital of Israel regardless of international declarations. Rather than end the conflict, unilateral actions by the Palestinians could exacerbate and prolong a dispute that has already gone on far too long. European countries recognizing a Palestinian state are rewarding intransigence by encouraging the Palestinians to sidestep negotiations. Peace and a Palestinian state will only come as a result of face-to-face talks between the leaders of Israel and the Palestinian Authority. It worked for Egypt and Jordan, and it can work for the Palestinians as well. Unfortunately, it's the one strategy they have decided not to pursue.